Hello everybody and welcome to this week's DaveCast. It is Thursday, March 10th as we continue in our study of the Sermon on the Mount, which we're going to get to in just a minute. But first I want to give you a few announcements from Conyers First. This past weekend we had our very first in-person worship service for a very long time, and I thought they all went very well. It was great seeing so many of you in person as we now continue this transition back to whatever the new normal is going to look like. I'm very encouraged about it all. Of course, we're going to continue our online presence with both the contemporary and traditional services being streamed live. And so whatever your comfort level is, whether you are waiting a while before returning in person, or if you're ready to come back for in-person worship with all of the safety precautions we have in place, I do hope that you will join us for worship this coming Sunday. This Sunday is coming up. We're going to have a special offering for UMCOR, which is the United Methodist Committee on Relief, which does such incredible work with disaster response. I know that a lot of you know all about them. And so there's a great need there following all that went on this past year in 2020. And so I do encourage you to be ready to give to this great cause. I also remind you that we're getting ready to do the Breakfast with the Bunny outreach on the Saturday before Easter Sunday. And our children's pastor, Shane Burns, could always use a few more volunteers if you are interested in doing that sort of thing. But also we do need individually wrapped, prepackaged Easter eggs and candy. And so I encourage you to give to that. There's several big barrels out around the church where you can drop those donations off for that cause. And so now let's jump back into our Bible study as we look at the text for this week, which is from Matthew chapter 6, verses 22 and 23. So I'll go ahead and read that for us now. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Back in the ancient world, it was thought that the eye let light out of the body and projected it onto objects so that they could be seen. So if the eye was not working, darkness and confusion would reign. And here in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus uses this as a metaphor as he says, if the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? So question, have you ever been in great darkness? Complete great darkness. I mean, darker than the inside of a cow kind of darkness. Well, a number of years ago, my family and I went on a little weekend adventure up to Chattanooga, or I guess technically I should say Lookout Mountain, Tennessee, to visit Ruby Falls, which is the tallest and deepest underground waterfall open to the public in the United States. And so to get there, you're put in a tour group, and then you begin by riding an elevator that goes down deep, deep underground, 26 stories, which is 1,120 feet underground. And then you kind of walk along this scenic path up to amongst all the stalactites and stalagmites, and they're all colorfully lit, and until you get up to the waterfall, which I will say is quite breathtaking. But if you've ever taken this tour, and I guess they do this, it's been a few years, but I guess they do this still, at one point on the tour, as they are explaining the history of Ruby Falls, they turn off all the lights. So I guess to show you what it would have been like for the original explorers who found it or something. But let me tell you what, when they do that, it is dark in there. I mean, complete darkness, great darkness. So in this week's passage, Jesus is using eyesight and darkness and light to make a spiritual point. That if our eyes are to remain healthy, if they are to see clearly, they must remain fixed on the kingdom. The eyes, both the physical and the spiritual, must be focused on God, not on earthly treasures, not on money, not on stuff, as he's just been talking about in the previous verses, but instead focused on God. In other words, we need to take care of what we are watching or seeing. Are we in control of what we are seeing, or does what we see control us? Think about the importance of headlights on a car. Nowadays we have so many street lights and lights from buildings and things that there's usually some light we can see if we go out at night. But suppose you are driving along a lonely old road somewhere on an overcast night someplace where there aren't any street lights and the headlights of your car go out. Suddenly we realize just how dark it really is. We can't see well, and it's dangerous, right? It's a similar thing along our spiritual journey with God. If our eyes are not focused on God and instead focused on whatever is eye-catching or whatever comes along, then we lose our sense of direction. And so Jesus is saying, if we do that, it might as well be dark. It is as if we are allowing darkness, things like cynicism, despair, greed, hostility, to creep into the heart via the eyes, distorting our eyesight and failing our vision. It's a spiritual challenge, isn't it? Think of what we see and hear every day. Think of all the challenges, all the distractions that want to take our eyes off the kingdom, from divisive political rhetoric that causes us to judge and condemn our neighbors, to seemingly nonstop commercials and advertisements that are all around us that make us want those things, long for those things that we don't really need, to idle gossip about who knows what, to just so many other things that distract us from loving God and loving our neighbor. Think of how it is a spiritual challenge to stay single-mindedly, wholeheartedly attuned to God, to stay hopeful and loving. Back at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount in the Beatitudes, which we looked at a few weeks ago now, Jesus says that only the pure in heart can see God. Only those whose hearts have been cleansed by the power of God's grace can see God fully and truthfully. So here's an important question to ponder. What is it for you that may cause you to take your eyes off of the kingdom? Because I know this can differ from person to person. We each have things that we struggle with. How can we all learn to see more clearly God's light before us? Because there's darkness all around us, for sure. But there's also God's light if we develop that kind of spiritual eyesight that allows us to see God's kingdom. When the world becomes a dark place, how much more is important that we remember the eye is the lamp of the body. We need to ground ourselves each and every day in the reality that God, the Creator, has surrounded our lives with gifts. All of this reminds me of a line from the great hymn, Come Thou Fount. Actually, the very first line that says, Come Thou Fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing Thy grace. And of course, this is a slightly different metaphor from that of eyesight. It's more about hearing rather than seeing. But the point, I think, is the same. Our hearts need regular tuning as we are confronted with conflicting tones in various settings all throughout our life. As a musician, the metaphor of tuning an instrument really speaks to me. When my guitar is out of tune, it doesn't sound too pretty. But when I take the time to adjust each string to just the right frequency, it can make beautiful music. So it is with our life of faith. Each day we need to ask God to take our out-of-tune, dysfunctional hearts and tune them to sing about God's grace. So as I come to the close today, may God grant us all that kind of spiritual eyesight, that we may see the world as Jesus sees, and may God tune our spiritual hearing so that we might sing of God's grace. All right, I'll be back next Thursday with another DaveCast. Church is on Sunday at 9:30, 11 in person, or streaming live online. And so until then, keep bringing the hope, and I will see you soon. God bless you.